From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. Earlier this year, Mayor Ted Wheeler shook up the Bureau assignments for city commissioners. Commissioner Carmen Rubio, who was in charge of parks, now has the lead on two of the city's most critical issues: the housing crisis, building more affordable housing, and also helping Portland businesses thrive. Rubio's in charge of the Housing Bureau, the Bureau of Development Services, Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and heads up Prosper Portland, the city's economic development agency. The governor has made it abundantly clear the state needs more affordable housing, and she wants to speed up housing production. What is Commissioner Rubio's action plan? And does it, as some critics claim, come at an environmental cost? Joining us now to chat about that and reflect on her nearly 2.5 years as commissioner, welcome to my guest, Portland City Commissioner Carmen Rubio. So good to have you back on the show.
Great to be here, Laurel.
And just last week, both you and I were knighted by the Royal Rosarians into the mythical realm of Rosarians, part of Rose Festival. We have a picture of you and I. This is after the ceremony.
Oh, that's so great.
We're wearing our medals. That was pretty much of an honor, wasn't it?
It was such an honor. It was such a quintessential Portland experience. It was an honor to be there.
Yeah, it was just really exciting. And now, in addition to your title as commissioner, you have the title of Dame.
Yes.
Carmen Rubio.
Likewise.
It kind of has a ring to it, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, on a serious note, let's talk about one of the most pressing issues facing the City of Roses, and that is the lack of affordable housing. Yes. And the governor, as I mentioned, has really given a mandate to speed up production. Help us understand where we are in Portland when it comes to housing. How far behind are we?
Yeah, unfortunately, Laurel, it's not good news. You know, we're in this moment where we're experiencing the perfect storm of market conditions where we're coming out of the pandemic. We also see inflation and rising construction costs all together. That makes it really challenging right now in terms of the housing production outlook. And we're behind in our housing production. So to really get to where we need to be, we need to be building 20,000 more housing units. And that's just for affordable housing. If we actually think about workforce housing and market rate, you would double that number.
And what is your goal? When do you hope to get to that number?
Well, we're working on it now, and we know that to get to that goal, it would take about 10 years. But we're getting started now, and the good news is we're all aligned at the local and the state level.
Well, to that end, you recently sent out a survey to builders, architects, to staff members, asking them what city requirements could be modified to help speed up production. And what did you hear back?
So we heard back numerous things from the numerous experts, you know, nonprofit developers, for-profit developers, people within our permitting bureau, in other jurisdictions, and they all coalesced around certain policies and processes that sometimes things get stuck or we need to find a way to untangle the knot. In addition to that, we have the challenge of our commission form of government, where we have the permitting processes really broken up over several bureaus. So we're trying to tackle all of those issues together.
So the permitting process, you've really looked into how the permitting process intersects with housing production. Tell us how it works now and how it's not working, and what do you want to change? How would you change it?
Yeah, so how it works now is we have our Bureau of Development Services, which is really the gateway to all the other permitting entities. And there are multiple bureaus, the infrastructure bureaus like water and Bureau of Environmental Services, et cetera, and transportation that all have a role. The Fire Bureau also has a role, as well as housing, and also the development services as well. So it's the consumer or the customer has to navigate multiple bureaus through the permitting bureau, or through the development services bureau. But we think that there are ways that we can increase that efficiency by working together to come up with some easy fixes, but also look at some structural ones that we might have to take on as well.
So when the city changes to its new form of government, which we'll talk about later, do you think this will make it easier for the city administrator is going to be higher?
That is certainly my hope. We have this short window until that time comes. So my goal is to work together with my colleagues and Bureau leaders who are very experts on this issue so that we can come up with these longer term solutions before that change happens.
When you talk about modifying requirements for housing, there is some concern. I know you've heard from environmentalists and conservationists that speeding up housing production by relaxing requirements for things like trees, open spaces, bicycle parking, bird-safe windows, eco-roofs, that faster production could come at the cost of climate and the environment. And Bob Salinger, who's the Urban Conservation Director for Willamette Riverkeeper, told Willamette Weeks speeding up these environmental or suspending these environmental regulations ignores the city's climate goals. And I know protecting the climate is important to you. What do you think about that criticism?
I think that Bob is raising good points for us to be ever aware of as we move through all of these process analyses. I happen to be a very big advocate and firm advocate on climate issues. So that is something ever present in my mind. But I do think that there's a way for us to balance the catalyzation and fast tracking of housing while lifting up our climate goals and being true to our climate action plan.
One of the other concerns he brings up is he says that relaxing these requirements could ignore low income and marginal communities that often live in the grayest, the hottest, and most polluted landscapes. That was such a big concern during the heat wave we had in 2021. Yeah. Does the idea of relaxing some of these permitting processes, some of these rules, ignore those vulnerable populations?
Well, the good news is that all the things that you've outlined as examples are things that are very dear to my heart and our core city values. So, for example, we have no interest or plan in creating a situation where we're targeting trees. In fact, we're doubling down on our tree canopy expansion,
which I know you're very proud of.
Yes. So I think it's important when you look at the list of issues that surfaced. It doesn't mean that we're tackling all the list. It's just what are presently on people's minds. It's our job to look at that list and then check it against our values as a city, and then go from there.
So people know that the reason we're talking a lot about climate too is because you were the head of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. It must be a challenge for you to try to reach those climate goals and also reach the housing production goals at the same time.
Yeah. Well, actually, they're not so hard when you think about that we're trying to support and lift up and center the same people. The same people that are experiencing housing shortages and feeling the pinch of the crisis probably the most acutely are oftentimes the same populations that are at the front line of the climate crisis as well. So I feel like these goals are mutually aligned.
Let's talk more about the city's climate goals. Some of the advocates that I've had on, some of the young people, are really frustrated that we aren't making more progress. The city wants to have a 40% reduction in carbon emissions by the year 2030, which is less than 7 years away, and then an 80% reduction by the year 2050 compared to 1990 levels. Where are we in trying to meet those goals?
Yeah, we still have more to go, and we still have 29% more reductions to make before we hit our 2030 goals. So while we have made some progress, we do have more to go. And so that's why I'm excited about the shared value around climate on our council.
Can you tell us more about maybe some of your action plan to try to reach those goals?
Sure. So one of the biggest steps that we've taken recently, as you might know, is and one of the biggest tools we have is the PCEF, Portland Clean Energy Fund. And with that fund, we have $750 million queued up to spend on climate mitigation, climate resiliency, and other projects over the next 5 years, and across 7 different kinds of drivers that we would use. And so I'm very excited for these changes regarding PCEF. We just recently updated them in council. So we are now going to review, coming in September, the climate action plan, or the climate investment plan rather. And that plan would outline at a high level what buckets we want to be spending down that money in over the next 5 years. So I'm very excited for some of the initiatives that are being discussed right now.
So it sounds like climate will be front and center as you go forward. Homelessness and housing affordability really go hand in hand. And the Safe Rest Villages was a plan, a project under Commissioner Dan Ryan, who was the Housing Bureau Director. Now that's yours, but he's going to continue with the Safe Rest Villages and see that through. But you did have a chance to go visit a site. Can you tell us what your impressions were and how you think it fits into the overall plan of the city to address homelessness?
You know, I think it's very important for the city, as we're in this housing crisis, we have to have multiple avenues for people who have multiple experiences and different kinds of needs to find the resource that best matches their need. And the Safe Rest Villages is one option on that continuum, you know, that helps move people out of homelessness and into housing, on the housing path. My impression of the Safe Rest Village was very, very impressed with the quality of care and the attention to detail, the ways that made the space feel quiet and like a home. You know, it was in an area with a lot of trees. There was relationships with the neighbors, and while, you know, neighbors have a lot of questions, and rightly so, there was genuine efforts and genuine conversations among neighbors and providers to make sure that there's a relationship there to fall back on.
Which one did you visit?
The one in North Portland. Yeah.
And the residents seemed comfortable there?
Well, we met a few of the residents, and the ones that were there asked really good questions, yeah, we'll see how that unfolds. But so far, I've been very impressed with Urban Alchemy, which is the group that was contracted to provide the services. The homes look very welcoming, and the amenities really good.
Well, let's talk about the vote that the City Council took last week to ban camping on public property in the city from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. And then there are strict rules for all other camping. Violators will be fined, and repeat violators could see jail time. Now, a lot of businesses say this is something that's needed because they're really frustrated because of crime, vandalism around their businesses. But other people say that, the critics say that it criminalizes homelessness. And so you were the only city commissioner to vote against this ban. So tell us your thinking there.
Yeah, my thinking was really, it came down to two reasons for me. First, you know, back last year when a lot of these things were up for discussion, and we passed several resolutions as a council. One of the things that we had committed to was exploring a policy that would be on the table later, you know, in this year. But there was agreement and a commitment not to add any provisions to any future policy that would criminalize someone just solely for being homeless. We have other tools and other laws already at our disposal that we could use to enforce if we needed to. So that for me felt like going back on our commitment earlier that we had made in the previous year. The second reason for me is, should the policy be in place, my other concern was that we have a planful way that things are in place. So once the policy goes into effect, that there's an ability for capacity, that there's day centers, that there's awareness among providers, that the shelters are open so that we can receive people that are going to, and the needs that are going to result of the new policy being put in place.
Which is something the City Council is planning, these large sanctioned camps.
Yes.
Eventually.
Which I support, yeah.
And you had an amendment where you wanted to delay this until those are open, but why didn't the City Council go for that? You
know, I don't know why they didn't vote for that, probably because of the urgency everybody is feeling. However, for me, I want a policy to work, and I want it to work in the best way possible. And that seemed a way to guarantee that we had the time and the runway for our providers, for our jurisdictional partners to actually be partners with us in ensuring that there was a place to receive people and that the policy was more meeting its intent.
Where are we on those mass alternative shelters?
I feel like we are still a few months away from a few of them opening up, maybe one a little sooner than the second, but my amendment was to wait until at least two were ready to receive people.
So one of your responsibilities is also to help businesses thrive. So a lot of these businesses are complaining that they've been hurt not only by the pandemic, but also by crime and vandalism, some of them homelessness around their businesses. How are you hoping to help Portland businesses recover.
Yes, and I hear and I understand, and I've seen it firsthand. I've gone on multiple tours and neighborhood walks, and even in my own neighborhood as well. So I feel and I hear people's frustration around some of these livability issues. And I'm really excited that we do have a council that is equally committed as I am to doing everything we can, looking at every tool we have to not only, on my end and in my portfolio, catalyze housing production as much as we can to the different ends of the spectrum, ensuring that we have, the public safety force capacitated, that we need, that we're working on response times to get to our community calls as soon as possible, that our businesses are equipped with resources, and I'm really happy that recently Prosper Portland has unveiled a new grant that is available for businesses to call, like if they want. I guess I should say later in the summer that we will unveil a QR code that we can release to businesses so that they can access resources and supports from the city of Portland, including some grants around vandalism or just for various security needs that they might need.
So there should be a QR code by the end of the summer to give them all the information?
Yes.
Well, I'm sure that'll be really helpful and welcome by the businesses. And you mentioned public safety, and I just have to touch on public safety because gun violence is at historic record levels.
Yes.
And the city has decided to take sort of a different tactic when it comes to gun safety, contracting with the National Institute of Criminal Justice Reform to develop a ceasefire plan. Are you optimistic that's going to make a difference?
I am really optimistic. We have, again, a lot of alignment around council for this. I'm fully supportive of the mayor's plan, his ceasefire plan, and I'm equally supportive of the notion of centering those most impacted by this gun violence in that solution. So I'm hopeful.
I think we all are hopeful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. It's time for us to take a break. Soon, Portland City Council will look a lot different as the city implements the change in the form of government that voters approved last fall. We'll get Commissioner Rubio's thoughts about that and her reflections on how the council's changed since she took office. We're back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter, and welcome once again to my guest, Portland City Commissioner Carmen Rubio. Once again, it's great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about how things have changed over the last couple of years. You were sworn into office at the end of December 2020, and we all remember what that was like. The racial justice protests were still going on. The city was shut down because of the pandemic. You met the council, all your fellow council members, just virtually. You had Zoom meetings for a long time. How have things changed in the 2.5 years since?
There's been quite a bit of change. So when I started in January of 21, everything was virtual. And so we had no access to our offices. We had to have everything by Zoom or Teams. And so it made it a lot different in terms of building relationships or really feeling the energy of City Hall and the city.
How do you think the city has changed since you first were elected?
Since that time, I think that what's changed a lot is how we communicate. Certainly, the idea of hybrid working and the notion of that is something that's different and that we're grappling with now. But it's also made me and my staff really appreciate the importance of relationships much more, the importance of clear communication. So in those things, I think they're changes that we've learned to acclimate to for the better.
And when you talk about relationships, when you were on the council at first, there were two women, you and Commissioner Joanne Hardesty. Now you're the only woman. You and Joanne Hardesty were close. You often voted together. You were seen by observers as two progressive votes. How have things changed on the council since her departure, and how has your role changed?
Well, I know you're probably aware of this too, to feel what it's like to be the only woman in a room. And honestly, it's not been the first time I've been the only woman in a room. So I just do my best to work really hard and move my agenda, and I'll work with anyone to do that. I will also say that, what's a big shift from the time before was my portfolio is vastly different. So in that time, the work has definitely increased, and there are a lot of high stakes issues right now that matter, and very, very excited that the mayor entrusted me with this portfolio.
Well, important. We talked about climate, housing, businesses.
Yes.
You know, we talked also about your vote against the ban, the camping ban, and you were the only vote against it. Is it hard sometimes to be the only vote? Yes or no?
It's not hard. It's hard to know that, you know, when you've carefully considered an issue, it's hard knowing that sometimes I will disappoint people that I really respect. But part of the job is really carefully weighing all the options and considering them thoughtfully. And that's what voters elected me to do. And I'm trying my very best to honor that promise.
Well, the city council is going to look a lot different at the end of next year. Voters approved a new ranked choice voting system and a bigger council with new leadership roles. How are you and the council preparing for that change?
You know, we're doing our best to work within our portfolios. The mayor made a great decision when he reassigned bureaus by cluster. It's made things immensely easier for us to actually move an agenda when you have all the right leaders in the room to have that conversation around an issue that touches multiple bureaus. So in that way, we're making some really good progress, and I'm excited to see what this year brings for all of us.
Well, the new commission is going to be much bigger with 4 geographic districts, and there will be 3 commissioners elected from each district, so a total of 12. The mayor would be elected citywide, so that would be 13, and there would be professional city administrator. What impact do you think that change is going to have on how the city runs?
I think it'll have a tremendous impact, because I think folks at the local level in their districts will have much more access to their district commissioners. That's a significant change. The other way that I think there will be more access is that, you know, I think that you know, there's going to be more opportunity to be present in the district itself. One of the things that's a key difference is that we are the administrative leader right now, as well as a policy leader for the city. These will just be policy-focused leaders, and so the administrative business will be left to the mayor and the city manager. So I will be interested to see how that dynamic plays out, and I'm hopeful for that.
So the districts are still being drawn out, the maps. When they're all drawn out, will you run again?
You know, I'm just working really hard right now on all the critical issues we have, but for me, nothing is off the table.
So what would you say in the time that you have left as commissioner is your most important goal that you want to reach?
Definitely housing, and doing everything to catalyze housing as much as possible, because we are at the heart of this crisis right now. And ancillary to that is fixing our permitting system.
We have a little time left that I wanted to go back and ask you a question that I missed in the first segment about the city-county relationship. There's been tension between the city and county over the Joint Office of Homeless Services and how it's spending available funds to address the homeless crisis, including money left over or not being spent from the Metro Housing Services measure. Your fellow Commissioner Mapps has said he's dissatisfied with the city's contract with the county because the city doesn't have any control over how that money is spent. What are your thoughts about that?
I think the city and my colleagues and council has been dissatisfied in the past with the challenge of communication and coming to agreement. I would say that I'm hopeful right now. We have different leadership in different places. Chair Vega Peterson has been very collaborative. She and the mayor have been progressing through an agenda. They're collaborating around mutual goals, and I would say they're making some good progress.
So we have to talk about something that's fun coming up this summer. You're getting married, right? Tell us about that.
So during the pandemic, my partner Tony and I, we quietly got exchanged vows during the pandemic. So this is probably the first time some of my family's even hearing about this. So we're having a wedding this summer to have our loved ones around us as we share vows.
So what's the big date?
It's going to be in August. Yeah.
So many people got married during COVID, so it's nice that you're going to have the ceremony this time and have loved ones around. Just about 20 seconds left to leave a final thought with our viewers.
So, do you know, Portland is opening up. It's coming back. I'm so excited and so honored to be a commissioner during this time. It was hard, and it is hard, but things are changing, and I believe in Portlanders, and I believe in Portland.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Rubio, for joining us here on Straight Talk.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure. Dame Carmen Rubio.
You.
And thank you for watching. We hope you'll join me next week when we talk with the folks in Vancouver who are behind the successful Safe Stay communities in Vancouver. And remember, you can get Straight Talk as a podcast. Just search for KGW Straight Talk wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you next week for Straight Talk. Have a great week.